In today's episode of our photography review show, we're gonna look at landscape, wildlife, mixed, and portrait photographers. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you had a great week and I hope you're ready for even more photography reviews. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub and I'm a landscape photographer based in West Sussex, England. In this show, I review photos every week on Monday and I've been doing it for the last 6 or 7 months. It's been very popular and this is why we limit the entries to 1 or 2 photos per week. Now, if you want to join us for this photography review show, you can do that by joining our membership called Clever Photographer Plus. All you need to do is to head to our website, cleverphotography.com, and search there for the actual membership. Now let's talk about the membership. For a little fee, every month you get a new theme bundle full of textures, overlays, presets, Photoshop actions, brushes, LUTs, and many more. So it's really worth it. So make sure that you visit our website, check out the membership, and join us for the next photography review show next Monday. And here we are in the Lightroom CC. We have 8 amazing photographers to look at, so let's jump straight into it. So starting with the landscape photographer right here from Tony. Tony sent us 2 images, so let's have a look at them. Let's jump into the information, the camera information, starting with this picture right here, shot by Nikon D750 with the 16 to 35mm lens, and from your camera settings, ISO 100, 17mm, f11 1/30th of a second. So the setting is great. ISO 100 spot on, 17mm nice and wide, f11 which is great, obviously making sure that you have enough details on the foreground here as well as at the back, and 1/30th of a second, making sure that you have a nice details in the sky. It's a shame that you couldn't go a little bit slower, because then you would get a little bit smoother water and it would add a different effect to it. However, I think there's nothing really wrong with the settings and I think it's very well done. Now moving on this one, talking about the technical part of the image. This was shot with a Sony maybe A7 Mark II, if I'm right. Anyway, the lens was again 16 to 35mm, and from the camera settings, ISO 100, 17mm f11 and 1/250th of a second. So ISO 100 once again spot on. Tony, that's the way to do it, definitely. Especially with the landscape during a daylight, no need to go anywhere out of that. 70mm again quite high, and that's what give you quite dominant foreground elements, like in this case here. f11 is perfect. Once again, when you have a kind of immediate foreground element, just like in this case, you really want to be somewhere around f11, making sure that everything is nice and sharp all the way through. 1/250th of a second, once again, give us nice details in the sky with this lovely picture. Now talking about the light here, it's a little bit, obviously, it's a daylight, so the shadows are a little bit harsher. It's not as diffused, so there's a lot of brightness here, and then everything else is a little bit diffused there. So I just wish that there was maybe like a squares of sun, which would make it a little bit more interesting. However, I still think it's very pretty photo. Which brings us to the artistic part, or the composition part of the image, which I think is great. I think it's very lovely, very well done, you know, using certain composition rules here. You have obviously your foreground element right here, with the foreground being on your rule of third here, which I think works very well too. The stone and the different layers give us a sense of depth, which works very well here. Also, somehow the valley gives a little bit of a flow, so I think there's lots of stuff right. Also, keeping 2/3 of the land with the 1/3 of the sky works really well for this type of epic landscape. So as a composition goes, this is very well done, Tony. I think it's well thought. All the elements are there for a reason, and I think it's very well done. I think it's maybe tilting just a little bit, looking at the leg, but other than that, excellent. Really love the result. With this one, once again, talking about composition, there are obviously 2 different ways to do this shot. One could have been that you were really straight in a center with the pierre, which would be nice as well. Sometimes, especially when you have the elements which are almost a reflection of each other, so they're very equal, they look quite good when they centered. Let me just show you what I mean. I hope I describe it well. Let's just unlock this. What you could have gone for would be something like this. I know it's kind of tilting towards one side, but that's something what you could have done. But you went for this, and I think that works quite well as well. The only thing is with the composition is that there is lots of this space where it doesn't really offer anything. There's not much happening there. So obviously all the drama, all the leading line, everything is kind of packed into the side, which works, yes, following the thirds again, but it's almost like it's missing a balance. I think that's the words I'm trying to look for. You know, the glow is behind the pier is on this side, there is more mountains on this side. So I think compared to this space, which is really empty, the balance isn't 100% great there. Other than that, the light is beautiful, the colors are nice, the details are lovely, the pier works very well here. I think again, the 2/3 of the land compared to 1/3 of the sky works very well too. So all in all, Tony, it's very nice as well. I would just have thought differently about this area. Now, if there would be other interesting elements in it, maybe some stones or little island or anything, trees or whatever, then I would have gone for it. But like this, I hope you know what I mean. There's a lots of the drama and lots of the stuff is happening on this side of the image. So just something to think of. Now, when it comes to post-processing, let's just double check your white balance. And actually, you are probably spot on because it didn't help with anything. I wonder if you would have pushed a little bit more of the temperature. No, I think it doesn't make a big difference. It's kind of almost like a monotone or chromatone. It has only this kind of hues of blue with the warmth, which I think works very well. That's a really nice contrast. Usually the kind of from blue into the warm, I think it always works. So that's very well done. It looks very natural. I quite like how the water came out at the end. Being a little bit higher means that there is not too many details coming out from that. So I think that works very well. And all in all, I think it's lovely. I think it's very well done, this one. Let's move on this one. Talking about post-processing, I would probably just try to straighten it a little bit. So maybe just something like this. Let's see. If we do that, I think it looks a little bit more natural on the little loch or lake at the back. So that would be what I would probably be looking at, and leave the rest just to make sure that this is straight. Other than that, nothing really too crazy for me. Again, always double check the white balance. It was a little bit warmer, but I think really not too far from what you have created. Just kind of keeping an eye to try to avoid the blue tint at this part of the mountain. As you can see, when I push the pink a little bit, it kind of takes a little bit of it away, a little bit of warmth as well, just removes a little bit of blue tint, which is quite normal with that much of a blue sky above it. You could add a little vignette. However, I think it works. I think it's very nicely done. The only thing is that obviously as the brightest part of the image is in a foreground, the eyes are not that keen to go to the rest of it. Usually it's better when it's the other way around, when maybe the foreground is a little bit darker or faded or flat and the rest of it is kind of bright. So the eyes have to go through the foreground to the back, where in this case, your eyes are really busy with the foreground and you're not really noticing that much the back until later on. So that's just something to maybe keep an eye on. But I completely understand there's nothing you could do about it. It's just always looking for a way to improve the image and think of images differently. And I hope it's helpful. Tony, anyway, great attempts, brilliant images. Love this one. Epic landscape, as always. This beautiful sunset. Two completely different images as well. This one is very peaceful, very simple, very relaxing atmosphere. This one is really lively, full of details, full of texture, full of light. So two completely different images, but still lovely, lovely results. So thank you for sharing them with us. Moving on, some mixed photographers. So we have a Blake here. Blake, we have this lizard right here and a little bit of landscape here. So let's have a look at it. Let's jump into your camera details. So this one was photographed with iPhone 12, I believe. Now there are some camera details on it. However, really there is a little bit of a difference between camera, your DSLR and mirrorless camera details and your mobile phone details, because the lenses are different. So reading it will not make much difference. ISO 32 obviously is quite decent. f1.6, 1/210th of a second. Really the most important is by looking at it, is it sharp? Now zooming in, usually for the sharpness, it's ideal to start by zooming to the 100% and kind of seeing what's happening. There is lots of details on the animal, so I quite like that. I can't 100% recognize what is he standing on, if it's like a piece of wood or stone or whatever it is. However, the animal is sharp. It's almost kind of artistic approach for this picture, I think, rather than being very natural. I wonder if the background was like this or no. However, I really like it. I think it's very playful and very lively. However, from a technical point of view, you know, I'm judging the animal, which is sharp. The light on it is quite nice, and I would leave it there. Moving to this picture, talking about, again, technical details. Once again, you use a phone. From the camera settings, ISO 50, f1.6, 2400 second. So this one is a little bit different. I don't know if you applied any filters to it, but the sharpness is really kind of, it's very, very soft. It's almost like a watercolor. It looks more as a painting rather than a picture. So I don't know if this is through some kind of filter or something. Now, it's a lovely effect. However, it doesn't have that much to do with photography anymore. I think once you pass that, you're just starting to create little different art, you know. Also, you have this kind of really painting look on the foreground and on the ground, and then you have this quite sharp sky. So I don't know if it matches together too well. You would probably have to apply the same effect to the sky, and then maybe it would look a little bit more as it seems to be together. Now, when we talk about composition here, I think it's actually quite nicely done. I would have cropped it a little bit further, simply following the rule of 1/3 of a sky, 2/3 of the land, or the other way around. 2/3 of the sky and 1/3 of the ground. Depends on who is the main subject and what is it you're trying to focus on. So that would be my thing. Other than that, I think it quite works. Now, the tree helps us with the scale. So obviously we have an idea of the sizes. I also think these little hills, as they kind of go behind each other, help us with the depth. That works quite nicely too. It's a lovely scene, and I think composition wise it works quite well. Now on this one, obviously the animal is cropped a little bit. However, I think it works. There's an empty space in front of it, so that works quite well as well, to have some kind of active space where the animal can move in. Yeah, you could crop in a little bit further, I think, if you would want to. You know, you could kind of position the eye on the third, but I would just leave it. Now, talking about post-processing, so this one is the kind of special effect one, but I quite like the background. I think the way you done the kind of glow around the plants, I think it looks quite cool and nice. The light on the animal, leaving it quite natural, works very well too. I would maybe brighten up a little bit some parts of it, or open up a shadow just a little bit, because I think the contrast is quite strong there. However, I think the overall effect works really, really well. And it's, again, very playful. And once again, when we look at pictures like this, you always wonder, would it be something you would print and put in a frame? And I think you could totally do that. I think it would look very interesting, and some people would like that. Talking about this one, I think when it comes to post-processing, there is nothing necessarily wrong. I would have written back to the actual shot and see why you're getting so much softness, or what kind of filter you applied, and see it from there. Also, if you've done some sky replacements, it's quite visible at this part, which it sometimes happens, but it's something we need to keep an eye on. So Blake, I hope this was helpful. Lovely 2 images, things to work on, things to consider for the future, but still, I hope you had fun with it, and I hope you bring us more images soon. And now it's time to look at another photographer. Let's have a look at Evgeniy. Evgeniy, 2 images from you, tulips and beautiful flower with a bee. So let's jump to it. Starting with this picture right here, some beautiful tulips. Let's have a look at the camera settings. Your Pentax K100D with a Sigma lens, ISO 200, 210 millimeters, f5.6, 1/350th of a second. So looking at it, the camera setting seems to be quite fine for me. Obviously quite long lens with 210 millimeter. The f-stop give you quite soft background with already some depth of field between the foreground of the petals and the background. I think it looks quite cool. I like how 2 of them are sharp and the rest of them not. I think that looks quite nice. However, there's a lots of noise coming through on different parts of the image. So I wonder how is that, because for example, this part doesn't have a noise at all, where this part does. Similarly, on the petals and on the actual flowers, there is a lots of noise there as well, which is interesting because the ISO 200 should be able to handle it, especially when there is quite strong light coming through. So I'm wondering why that comes across like this. Anyway, the light is a little bit harsh. You get these kind of shadows here and here. However, it's still nice. I think it matches nicely the tulips themselves. The depth, again, I think works very well here with the kind of soft background. And all in all, I think it's quite nicely done. Moving on this one, once again, same camera, same lens. However, from the camera settings, ISO 200, 300mm zoom in. So really kind of punched in with lots of details on the animal. F13, 1/350th of a second. So once again, really nice sharpness at this area, including the animal. So I think that's very, very nice done. The depth of field works very well here. There is a softness at this area. Then there is details of the animal and the flower. And then there's softness again. I think that looks very natural and very lovely. Only thing is a shame for the light, because once again, you have a really kind of darker areas, strong shadows. You just wish it would be a little bit more even and a little bit more smooth, the light. So that would be maybe one way you could improve it from a technical point of view. Other than that, I'm very impressed by the details on the bee. I think it looks great. When it comes to composition, I think it's really cool as well. I mean, you could zoom in a little even further. Once you start to crop these parts anyway, you can zoom in further and maybe focus more on the animal. So you could maybe do something like this and actually place the animal more into the kind of thirds and increase the impact of the main subject. That's something I would do. Other than that, I think it looks cool. Lovely thought, beautiful combination, a lovely contrast of the colors, the yellow, the pink, the background. I think it works all together and it's very well done. Looking on this one, what I would do, I would also crop it a little bit further. And simply because the main subject are those two tulips, I would probably put them in a center. So this is something I would do with it. If I would want to change something on the composition. Also, you could do the opposite. You could just kind of crop it from the bottom and really place them on this lower third and get something like this. Completely up to you. Not a big deal, just a suggestion. I think what really works on the composition is the depth. That makes a big difference. And all in all, it's lovely scene, really kind of make you feel like spring and everything. So well done there. Now looking at it and talking about post-processing, I think the main thing you need to focus here is the amount of noise. I think there must be a way to remove it simply from the fact that it should be quite a bright day, so it shouldn't be a problem to keep the noise under control. Also, there is little kind of mark here, which I'm not sure what it's created by, but it's quite visible and it's distracting. So that's another thing I would be keeping an eye on. With the noise, I'm wondering if we go into the detail and maybe push the noise reduction, if it helps. But it doesn't actually remove much of the noise. So that's interesting. Maybe you used a plugin to sharpen it, so then sometimes you need to make the adjustment in the plugin itself. Other than that, I think the white balance is quite nice. Let's see if we go to auto, it makes it so much more cooler. So I would leave it the way it is. I think the nice vignette works very well as well, and it's well done. On this one, as a post-processing go, I wouldn't actually change anything. I would crop it differently. Yeah, that's I'd already told you. Maybe push the warmth just a little bit further with the tint. But other than that, I would leave it. I think it's brilliant. Yes, you could use a little masking tool with the brush and maybe brush a little further on the actual bee and on the flower. But those are just the details. All in all, Evgeniy, I think this is a great attempt. I just wish the light was a little bit more diffused. I think that would really help. On this one, it's lovely, but the noise is something what kind of surprised me, specifically when it's really in this specific locations. It's not all across, it's just these kind of patches of noise. So have a look, see what you can do, and thank you very much for sending us your photos. It's always a pleasure to see them. Which brings us to Zdenek. Zdenek, we have 2 images to look at. Let's jump to it. Starting with this photo right here, it's very unusual to get the picture from you with water in it, to be honest. I can't remember if we had one already or no. Anyway, we're looking at the camera settings again. Canon 600D with the lens 18 to 55 millimeters, and from the main settings, ISO 100, 30 millimeters, f10, 1/200 of a second. So as a camera setting goes, I think it's spot on. Everything is the way it should be. Nice ISO as well. Let's just move in to see if we have too much of a noise. We don't. 30 millimeters is fine, f10 as well, 1/200 of a second. It's just, I don't see the sharpness that much. When I am like this, it's fine. When I zoom into 100, it looks, especially at the back, a little bit soft, Zdenek. So something to maybe double check. I wonder what's the size of the image. Let's have a look. If we can see it here. I can't see it from here, of course, as usual. That's me. However, it maybe is the transition to the JPEG that took a little bit of the sharpness away. What probably kind of distract me from a technical point the most is the sky, and it's the sun rays, which kind of creates this rainbow effects, which when it's really pushed on, it creates almost like a different layers of light, and it takes lots of attention away. So even though the foreground is nice and the background and middle ground as well, that much of a brightness and also these artifacts and elements in the sky, when you look at it, immediately your eyes go up and into the sun, and then you start to see these fragments. So that's just from the technical point, the one thing. So double check the sharpness on it. That would be my first thing to suggest. And second thing is, see if you don't have an image where maybe these artifacts are not as visible. Moving on this one, talking about technical, I love this one. I love the kind of light coming from this side and then the shadows from the other. I think it looks great. So again, looking at your camera and camera settings, it's a Canon 77D with 55 to 250 millimeters lens, ISO 400, 220 millimeters, f5.6, 1/500th of a second. So I think the setting is fine. Obviously a little lower situation, so you push the ISO, which 400 is perfectly fine. 220, nice zoom in, really focusing on the head. f5.6, I would have assumed that it would give you a little bit softer background than this, because some of the details, specifically because it has a similar colors as the horn, you just wish it would be even a little softer. Personally, 1/500th of a second, giving us plenty speed to catch all the details we need. So I think that's really cool. Talking about composition, I think this is lovely. I think it's something a little bit different. Cropping on the head like this, specifically when the head or the subject, any subject, is very symmetric and mirror-like. It can be placed in the center like this. I think it looks really cool. Obviously, with her facing directly towards you, it gives us the space on the side. It makes it look very cool, and it's a lovely, beautiful image. I told you already about the light. I think that looks great. I think there's just enough space around to make it nice, and all in all, it's very well done. Talking about this one and the composition, again, I think the biggest reminder here is about the brightness. And again, working with different stimulus we use for human eyes, brightness, dark points, textures, local adjustments. One of the main rule when it comes to photography in paintings and all that kind of art is that human eyes are attracted by the brightest and whitest part of the image. And in your case, that's the sun. It's up there. Everything goes up there. So that would be the one thing I would be looking at. If I forget the sun, this foreground element is very good. Really kind of dominant foreground, helping us with the scale, helping us with the foreground. And then everything goes through. I also wish that the mountains or the hills at the back would be a little bit bigger. And that's maybe because of the 30 millimeters lens. You know, when you have this really dominant foreground, the lake is decent size, but then the mountains at the back just looks very tiny. Although I think they must be huge. But I wonder if there was any way you could have shot it with a little less wider lens. Post-processing on this one, I'm not 100% sure about the white balance. Let's just double check when we go into color and auto. It helps a little bit, I think. Let me show you before how you have this kind of hue of green coming through the sun and then joining on the actual grass. I think this helps a little bit, and that's where I would start. I would definitely bring the exposure down a little bit just to take a little bit of harshness away and take it from there. But start focusing on the sun, I think. Moving on this one, I think it actually needs some of the exposure up. So I think plus 64 sounds good. Let's see how the white balance works out here. So actually you are a little bit warmer, which I think works very well here. So the brightness is good. You could use little linear gradient from this side and actually push some more of the exposure with little bit of warmth and minus clarity to almost make it look like a glow coming from that side. So again, we're following the natural light. We're not really adding anything. We just making it more as an impact. Other than that, I think it's cool. It's lovely, lovely, lovely portrait. Very, very well done. Something a little bit different. I think well executed. You should be really happy about this, Zdenek. So thank you very much for sending your photos over. It's always a pleasure to see them. You take care, stay safe, and send us more pictures for the next episode. Moving on, we have a John Dalston. John, and my favorite subject right here, super cool young lady with very interesting face and great combination of the hair. This looks like a school uniform almost, and very, very, very nice attempt with the black background. So we'll talk about that in a second. And then John also does pet portraits, and this looks very cool. It's very, very nice black and white photo with the bouquet at the back, very nice and soft background. Let's jump into it. Starting by looking at the camera details, Nikon D850 with a 70 to 200 millimeters lens, ISO 100, 200 millimeters f2.8, 1/500 of a second. And what came out from it is brilliant. Really, really happy with the result. Very nice portrait. I think the square for this type of photography works very well as a crop. Lots of details on this part of the image. 200 millimeters, so you are a little bit further, but then you get every shape of the body very natural. It looks all very realistic, so I think that works really well. And on the top of it, the f2.8 creates this lovely background, which really adds something special to it. It looks great in black and white. Really like it. I think it helps probably with the light, which was coming from the top. And I think it's nicely done. The eyes, the level of the details in the eyes, beautiful, beautiful. Not much I can add here. On this one, Nikon D850, 24 to 70 millimeters. And from the camera setting, ISO 100, 70 millimeters, f5.6, 1/320th of a second. Now let's have a look at it. From the camera settings, I think there's everything fine there. Wouldn't worry too much about it. Obviously the sharpness is there. Again, lots of lovely details. The light coming very much from the top, or that's how it's made to look like. Highlighting and creating this kind of oval on her face works very well. Let's just open the shadows for a second and see what was behind. I just wonder how did you, if you actually made the darkness in a post-processing or if it was done in camera. Maybe you can just shoot me a quick message in under the video. However, I think the result looks very nice. The only part I think is this one where there should be a little bit more darkness, a little bit more shadow. I think it should be a little bit more gradient the way it come across. I think it looks almost like it's cut out from magazine or something. All these parts looks brilliant. I love everything around the face, the tie. This part as well looks very natural, but then you come at this part at the top and it looks almost like you went to Photoshop, you selected that and then paste a black background behind it. So I think that you need to work a little bit more with some kind of brush to kind of blend in a little bit more of the darkness from behind. And maybe it was completely done like this. However, just from my opinion, this is maybe something to work on. Now I'm wondering what composition wise. Composition, I think it's lovely. I think it's a lovely idea. It's well executed, just a little bit more of behind. Once again, the details are great. Obviously, the light is very interesting, very well done. Which brings us to the post-processing, and that very much follows what I've been talking about for the last 2 minutes. And that's just to try to blend the top a little bit further. I wonder if we would just use a brush with a little bit of minor exposure, really, really feather the brush as well, and just do something like this. If it would look a little bit more like it was meant to be. Let's do one more, and again, minus, and again. I hope you know what I mean, but I'm just kind of trying to see if we can help to it. I know if we can do one more with really something like this. I wonder if it would help. It would need a little bit more work, maybe work with the raw file, but all in all, it's still a very lovely picture. All this part looks very natural, very good, so the rest is perfect. On this one, when it comes to post-processing, nothing I can add. As I say again, I think the square crop works very well here. The level of details are great. The kind of shadows and highlights works very well here. The work with the whites and blacks is nice. So all in all, John, well done. Great 2 images, something to think about for the future, but excellent work. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. Make sure you send more in the near future. Moving to the wildlife photographers. First of all, Ken, it's time to look at your pictures. And I love the turtle this week. Such a cool picture. She looks almost like she's half sleeping, very busy, sitting on this trunk with lots of details here. So let's jump to it. Nikon Coolpix P1000 with ISO 400, 306 millimeters on your lens, f6.3, 1/160th of a second. So once again, I love the level of details. I think that's really cool. Also love this little flower here or plant. I think that is very nice as well. Probably one of recently one of very nicest photo I've seen, Ken. But this is excellent. I really like technically what you've done here. The depth at the back with the soft background, I think that looks great. The contrast between the colors of the animal and background, again, very well done. The level of details, the light, this is excellent work, and I'm really impressed and happy about it. Which brings us to this picture, talking about technical skills again, keeping it with the same camera. From the camera settings, ISO 140, 155 millimeters, f5.6, 1/500th of a second. Now, it's a gorgeous capture. I mean, again, we're talking about a bird eating a fish, you know, being able to capture all of that. I think that is very tricky. It's very well done. However, there is a tiny bit of softness, and that could be also just from transferring the image from raw file to JPEG. So something to kind of keep an eye on. And also a little bit of noise here. So maybe it was kind of little lower light situation here. All in all, it's a beautiful image and great attempt. However, compared to this one just needs a little bit more sharpness and keeping an eye on the noise, I think. With the composition, I think it's nice. I wish there was a little bit more space on this side, I think. However, sometimes there's nothing you can do. Also, the whole thing seems to be tilting just a little bit, but together, I think it's cool. Obviously, coming from the water with the wrinkles, I think it looks very nice. On this one, similarly, I wish there was a little bit more space in front of the turtle. We could just, what we could do, unlock this, then crop a little bit of the top, and maybe do something like this. So that way we give her a little bit more space in front and it looks a little bit more thoughtful and it has a little bit more impact there, I think. Other than that, as a composition goes, I think it's cool. Once again, the trunk with the animal on it, with the background being soft and different colors, great work. Similarly, on post-processing, the colors are all natural, so very well done there. You can double check. However, as you can see, when I put it to auto, it doesn't switch to anything else, so well done there. There is already a little bit of a vignette on it. We could add even more to do something like this. I would probably use linear gradient just to close a little bit from here. Again, just bringing more attention towards the turtle. But other than that, great job. Loving the image. On this one, this is very natural picture, so we don't want to do too much of it. Of course, as always, we can double check the white balance. We can add a little bit of warmth to it if we want to. We can add a little bit of a vignette to, again, bring more attention towards the animal, but still altogether excellent. This is technically excellent image, being able to capture something like this. Obviously, the turtle isn't nowhere that fast. However, technically, when it comes to camera setting, when it comes to result, this is excellent. One of the best pictures I've seen in recent weeks. So thank you very much, Ken. Thank you for sharing it with us. Which brings us to Laurie. Laurie, we have two images. This beautiful animal right here. What a majestic. I wonder how tall is this when it stands up. That must be meters tall. And then this bird ready to give it a go. So let's have a look at it. Let's talk about the camera settings, starting on this one. Canon Rebel T3 with your camera settings, ISO 100, 102 millimeters, f5, 1/250th of a second. So lots of details, which is lovely. Let's just zoom in here. Obviously, texture in the foreground. It's a shame for the background still having that many details because it's kind of busy. Although, and maybe it has to do also with the fact that the bird is dark and the background is a little bit dark. So you just wish there was a little bit more contrast between them, but you just can't help. Sometimes that's the way it is. But focusing on the animal more, I think the details are nice. The light is a little bit harsh with these kind of shadows around. Obviously also on his little face, you kind of see how this part of the face is getting darker, but it's still beautiful, beautiful image. And camera wise, I don't think there is anything you should have done differently on your camera. It's more, I wish you were there at a different time of the day. However, still very pretty. Moving on this one, let's have a look. Different camera, Canon 5D Mark II, 70-300 millimeters, and from your camera settings, ISO 100, 235 millimeters lens, f8, 1/400 second. So as a camera goes, perfect with the ISO, keeping it nice and low. f8 again, giving us nice soft background. So I think that looks cool. This is the example. Let me just kind of come back to this. This is, you see how you have a darker background, darker subject. And when you have a darker subject and brighter background, what kind of difference it makes. So that's the only thing I'm trying to proof. So Laurie, I wonder where this animal lives. It's always you come, you must, I'm trying to imagine where you live. There must be national parks everywhere because you come with such a beautiful images, including this one. Let's just zoom in. I think it looks cool. There is like a details at this part. There is definitely details on the animal, which is the most important. And I think it looks cool. I don't think technically I would add much here. The light is also much more diffused here, which once again helps and makes it really nice. When it comes to cropping, I quite like it. I like how the head is in the center, really kind of being the main subject, the main focus. I think it's straightforward. We all know what you're trying to show us, and I think it works very well. Again, the contrast as a part of the composition works great here because of the different colors, and the depth of field also really, really well executed here. Which brings us back to this, and talking about composition, I would probably crop it more in a center to start with. Let's see, just making sure that he is in a center. We could crop a little bit of the bottom away, but we don't have to. All we need to do is to make sure that the bird is kind of straight, which I think mostly is. So that looks really cool, and leave it there. So I think again, obviously nice sharpness. It's nice depth of the field. Yeah, the center crop like this, I think works very well. I just wish there was more light. So we're not going to keep coming back to that, but you know what I mean. When it comes to post-processing, let's have a look at it. Let's talk about white balance. So it was a little bit warmer. I wonder if we would turn it to black and white, if it would help. Not crazily, but it could be something you could try, you know, really push the picture to a black and white, add a heavy vignette and make it almost like your fine art photo with the heavy focus on the subject, and do something like that. When we talk about this one, once again, we can have a look at your white balance, which isn't off at all. I think it looks very natural. I don't want to add vignette to it because I really like how it feels kind of light and airy. What it needs is a little bit of extra contrast, I think, and maybe a little bit of local adjustments with some simple dodge and burn, you know, just kind of making some parts of the image a little bit darker. Of course, not that much, but something like this, and other parts maybe a little bit brighter, you know, so something like this again, just, yeah, working on these things. And that's about it. Laurie, thank you so much for sharing your photos. Always pleasure to see them. You take care, stay safe, and also send us more pictures when you can. Which brings us to Stacy and the last photographer of this week. Stacy, we have three frog friends, and this beautiful image of the little flower losing the petals here. Beautiful. Let's have a look at it. Stacy, let's see if we have any camera details, and we don't, which is a little bit of a shame, but not the end of the world. Let's have a look at it from our own eyes. So zooming in, This one is a little bit darker. It's on the darker side, and the kind of contrast between the frogs and the rest of it, it doesn't look very natural. There is parts where it's kind of brighter. Also, there is fair bit of noise on the image, and the frogs, when I zoom in, now that could be screen, it could be anything, it could be size of the file, they're not 100% sharp. That's all I'm trying to say. Other than that, it's very interesting. I just wish that, you know, you have all this kind of dark and gloomy, and then you have the kind of animals, which I wish would be a little bit brighter. And then there is a little bit of noise, and I wish they would be a little bit sharper. Moving on this one though, Stacy, I absolutely love this one. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful capture. Again, there were no details for the camera, but I think the details here in the little petals looks great. I think it's beautiful. The background being almost like your bouquet, really soft background looks great. The contrast between the bright and dark background looks great here, and maybe this is what I was looking for here, is to have this kind of contrast between the really dark background and bright foreground. I think it looks brilliant. When it brings us to composition, there's something about it which make me think it's it's leaning towards one side, and I think that's the balance of the composition. I almost wonder if you could have positioned this in the center of the image, if it would help. We could try that. So let's say something like this. That's just a test. And right away, the composition is a little bit more balanced. Now, in a Photoshop, you could easily enlarge it a little bit with something like content aware, and you could get easily square again. But I think this way, it looks a little bit more powerful. Again, as the composition goes, the contrast of the colors works great. The depth of the field works great. Main subject works great. So well done on that. When it comes here, as a composition goes, I think it's actually quite nicely done. The rule of third, 3 animals, the center composition, obviously the depth of field with them. I think that all works very well. It's more the technique and maybe post-processing which needs to be looked at. Which brings us to post-processing. And I think in post-processing, adding a little bit of brightness would help. And then seeing on a raw file how you could clean them up a little bit and make it all a little bit less gloomy, more natural and more bright. That would be my suggestion there. On this one, I already show you, I would crop it a little bit tighter. And to be honest, for the rest of it, I would leave it because I love it. I love the result. I think the dark color of the green at the back, this really kind of full-on green, I love it. I think it's great. It's very kind of romantic, mystic, and it looks brilliant. So Stacy, thank you for sending us 2 pictures. Few different things to think of, to maybe see for the future how you could improve. I hope it's going to be helpful, and I hope you send us more pictures soon. And the same goes for all of you folks. If you want to join us, make sure you head to our website, cleverphotographer.com, and search for our membership, Clever Photographer Plus. You can join us today. You can join us every week for the photography review show. You can join us in our Clever Photographer Academy, and you can also receive every month 200 plus photography digital tools, including textures, overlays, presets, LUT, Photoshop actions, everything you can imagine when it comes to digital photography. Once again, thank you very much for watching today. I'm not gonna see you next week. I'm gonna see you in 2 weeks because next week is Easter, so we're gonna take a break. However, I'll see you right after.